Alright, just one small package with one small update. First one here is a hentai. Blu-ray version. I believe a DVD version did ship. I can show the back. But Princess Knight Angelica. Cool. This is not an anime. This is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Which means this has been sitting around for... curious, but not curious enough to actually fire it up, I guess. And then the only actual anime to show up today. That's Mars... RYD? Mars Red, okay. How the fuck is that an E? It says it... I see. What the I don't know that title. It's interesting. But it's a little... what can I say about it? It's regions A and B, and the camera won't focus. That's an English dub. The night is no longer a sanctuary. The right? What? Oh, it's different underneath the slipcover. That's nice. Unfortunately, I thought there were at least 2 releases in here, but there only being 1 in here, and 2 other things that I'm not going to open up because, well, Nintendo Switch isn't that high a priority thing. This one's definitely strange. Might be good, but I don't know what to think about it. So, facing each other. And then they're both facing to the right. A strange one. But I don't know what to think about it. It might be pretty cool. They definitely have very snazzy outfits. Well, I wouldn't call that snazzy, but that one's definitely more casual. But what can I say? Here's this week's anime Blu-ray collection update. Let's see. Definitely not as much intensity in the anime watched this week, especially compared to some of the previous weeks. But before I talk about that, let's just talk about the anime. So, I guess I finished from last time. Suppose a kid from the last dungeon movies moved to a starter town. You know, the last handful of episodes. And it was okay. I don't think as a whole the series is something you watch to get this ding out of watching the whole thing, I guess. So like, you don't watch it for an overarching story. You're supposed to watch because it's funny from moment to moment. And it was entertaining. I feel like something was off. But I can't place... I'm trying to remember my exact feelings because, you know, that's usually the better way to describe what was going on, whether or not you're going to evaluate whether to put time into it. There was something about the way it ended that was refreshing, though. Like, not a refreshing, oh, I just watched something that was really good, but rather... I don't know how to place it without talking too much and spoiling too much. So, yeah, I guess I don't. Obviously, with my Friday friend, you know, that time I got reincarnated as Slime, Season 2, you know, continued watching that. Specifically what Crunchyroll has labeled episodes 32 through 36.5. And, you know, it's fun, it's good stuff, it's neat. It's still reminiscent, while it's taking a more serious tone, that it is also still slightly pulling its punches. I mean, I've mentioned before that Reincarnated as a Slime works a lot better than it really should for something that constructs a lot of fake conflict, and sometimes the real conflict can get a little weaker. But it's still barely staying right where it needs to be in that regard. It's interesting because it reminds me of Naruto in a lot of ways, and for those of you that don't know, Naruto's a long-running shonen, which pretty much means, genres like that are defined by fake conflicts, kind of. Pulled punches sort of things where it's like, there's a lot of situations in there where the show just doesn't have any real consequences. And the best story arc in Naruto was definitely the pain arc, partially because they showed that they were willing to finally forego some of that stuff and actually have consequences happen that were real consequences with real, with real, whatever. And there were a couple things in there where they definitely, did some of that punch pulling stuff where it's like they had to make sure the consequences didn't really happen, but or they didn't completely happen or something. I don't know how to explain it, what I have in mind without talking directly about it. But the point is, Naruto Shippuden pulled that off, and they managed to remain pretty agreeable. Meanwhile, same thing with Reincarnated Slime in that regard. Very interesting stuff. Definitely curious to see where it's going. Noticing, though, that it is doing stuff to slow down. Now, 36.5 doesn't help that feeling because, I had mentioned in the episode just before that, at least it's not a recap episode. 36.5 is a recap episode. It takes place in between the episodes. That makes sense. And that was actually a decent place to stop because, at least we didn't start next time with a recap episode, even though we want to see what happens next. It's all for the best. Let's see. The series I started watching was The Day I Became a God. And I'm about halfway through episode 11. The premise is definitely something that hooks you and makes you curious. The execution doesn't feel like it weighs in on the premise it hooks you in at the beginning, per se. But it's pretty fun. Our main characters actually have some pretty refreshing... maybe charisma is not quite the right word, but it's the word I'm leaning towards at the moment. Something like that. Pretty fun. The main problem with the anime, for me, is definitely getting closer to the end, where it's just like, there are more and more things about that are frustrating me that I can't really talk about because they're too spoiler. Just way too spoiler. But I think the show's trying to be a little more philosophical than it needs to be, but it's just fueling my desire to have these pieces of shit punched to death. I can't even go to detail on why it's frustrating me, but it's definitely slowed down my finishing of it, and because of that, I haven't actually watched Dr. Stone Season 2 yet. That's still top of the list. This one was curious. I thought this one would be quick. But I underestimated how little energy I would have this week and focus on other stuff. So, along those lines, I'm not talking about those yet. I'm talking about the series that that are currently airing that I'm watching. I did not watch the latest episode of My Dress Up Darling. I was just way too exhausted because that came out like last night or the night before or something like that. And that bumps way too closely with what I'm needing to deal with now. But putting that aside, I watched Life with an Ordinary Guy Who Reincarnated as a Fantasy Knockout, episode 11. Fun episode. That series is continuing to do what it needs to do, and it is building to something that seems to be a bit of a climax or season climax, and that's good. Meanwhile, In the Land of Leedale, episode 12, I would actually say it's one of its weaker episodes. Now, I don't know how long it's planned to be running. If it's only supposed to be a single core, then it's definitely doing the wrong thing. If it's already planned for a double core, it's fine. It's not necessarily stuff that you would say, wait, what in the world is this? This is In the Land of Leedale. Now, it's still more along the lines of the Land of Leedale stuff, but like I've commented about some of the other series, especially Fantasy Knockout, they've generally done a good job of creating fresh environments, fresh interactions. But Leadale episode 12, I'm noticing was leaning a little too heavily on some of its already established tropes. And revisiting the jokes like that, it just isn't as fun for me. So, and I suspect most people aren't. Now, it's not like it's bad, but it is one of those things where it's just like, especially when I'm exhausted, it's hard to say, okay, I gotta... Definitely looking forward to this. I could have paused after that episode, so fortunately, because I'm watching one episode a week, any evening when I do have energy this week means that there's a good chance it'll get watched. Even though, you know, it was a weaker episode. It wasn't bad, horrible, but it's definitely starting to show some of those cracks in what usually happens when you have something that's a little more whimsical, leaning on trying to be funny. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not funny, but it means that if that's the goal, you know, it's really easy to fall into those patterns. Now, as for the exhaustion, it has to do with Animal Crossing. Basically, I came to the decision that one of my 2 islands I want to have be very presentable. I mean, I started playing again in order to make it more presentable, and now I'm realizing I should probably do some of the work that I never wanted to do before, and that's fill out the museum. And the exhaustion that causes mostly comes from, you know, keeping track of where you're going to get absolutely everything, which is a lot of information. I could just handle it if it was just that. You know, some of the anime would suffer, some of the DVD would suffer, but the exhaustion is coming into place because I'm realizing this is one of the worst times to be trying to think of some of that stuff, because the end of the month is on Thursday, and the day after that, you know, some of the things that are currently present will leave, and some of the things that aren't present will come. Basically, there's a shuffling of what critters are available for you to catch and put in the museum. And because of that, you know, I've created a list of stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, I really need to focus on these things because they'll be gone at the end of the week. And I'm pretty much down to just one thing I need at this point. Fortunately for me, I created 2 islands, a North Island and the South Island, so I have access to 2 hemispheres worth of critters. That increases the amount of things I can access and does give me a little flexibility, because there is one pier fish, that's a fish that you get while fishing on a pier, that will be disappearing from the South Island, but it's going to still be present in the North Island. So I don't have to worry about that, and all I have to worry about is getting a goddamn red king crab. And I highly suspect that I just maybe haven't done the stuff I need to do to unlock them on that account. So that account needs to go gathering sea creatures. Since I have gotten a snow crab, that means that I've gotten at least 40 creatures before, so I'm just going to go grab 30 creatures twice, and he'll donate whatever... Well, she will donate whatever she gets to the museum. It'll be fine. But the important thing is that I make sure I get to 80 creatures caught, so that the 2 crabs I don't have are there, and the one that I do need has a chance of actually spawning. So I have to make sure. And that's what I'm going to do tonight. So if you're wondering why I'm not watching anime tonight, well, it's that, and y'all saw the problem with the Discord server. Hopefully this beep is somebody legitimately responding to something I said somewhere, because I did say a couple of funny things. So, now hopefully it's that and not some other spam bot discovering my Discord invite. I say spam bot, but it was more like 3 of them. Such pain. Alright. So... yeah. What in the world is that? There's a fucking french fry on the ground. Alright, y'all, have a nice week.